Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's seventh Insider podcast on StealthBit's Active Directory Attacks training series, coming up with our partner Randy Franklin Smith over at Ultimate Windows Security. Don't want to ruin Randy's brand. Let's get the whole thing out there. We take a little break, you might have noticed, at the podcast here because, everybody went on vacation, didn't they?
That time of year.
Say you probably did too, so you may not even have noticed, but figured you'd put it out there. I am your host, Jonathan Sander, CTO of StealthBits, and joining me yet again here is Jeff Warren, VP of Product Management. Thanks again, Jeff.
You got it.
All right. We are very rare occurrence here in the same place, so we're actually eye to eye.
Very close.
Very close, trying to stay in the same frame here in the camera. I'll give Jeff his normal intro. He's a cybersecurity vet who's been working in the trenches with our customers and beyond for many years, and brings a lot of interesting perspective, especially on the Microsoft and Active Directory platforms, which is, again, where we're focused today. So we've got a lot going on right now, but one of the biggest things is this ongoing focus on attacks against the Active Directory infrastructure. And as I stated at the top, we're partnering with Ultimate Windows Security, our good friend Randy Franklin Smith, and we're going to be putting out a webinar soon. So that's going to also be you, right? You're doing the webinar with Randy, but we've also actually partnered. We're up on his site. We're also putting some other educational materials there. So there's a lot that's happening. We're helping each other help you, I guess is the best way to put it. But as always, it made me think of some questions. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to grill you here. So I know you've been having a lot of fun with this Randy Franklin Smith stuff. And the place where we've connected on his site, anyway, is he's the master of event ID. Right, so he goes into the Windows security log, for those of you who don't know, and he brings meaning to a lot of those event IDs. If you go Google any event IDs in Windows, you're going to find his site first. It's kind of crazy, but that's because he's put a lot of value there. But let me ask you, how do you see the connection between the event log, what's in there, that we've been talking about, right? How much of that really shows up in the event log, and how much, minus StealthBit solutions, which obviously would make things different. If I just have my event logs, how many of these attacks am I really going to see through those event logs, and how? Or if?
Yeah, so good question. When I've been working with Randy, that's one of the first places that we started. We picked a list of about 10 attacks that we wanted to go after, but found out that because there's so much research to be done, we narrowed it down to about 3. And depending on the threat, you're going to get different details in the event log. Some of them, you get some indicators. So one of them that you'll see in the webinar is DC sync. You get some indicator that somebody is doing a malicious synchronization of your Active Directory data, but it leaves out some key points. And I won't get into that too much today, but but some of them you get indicators missing some details that you're going to kind of wish you had.
Well, so let me make the question even more pointed. If you didn't know what to look for already, would you be likely to understand that that was what was happening?
No, not at all. Especially in this case, the DC sync event logs require obscure knowledge of Active Directory to have to figure out what's going on.
But that's why him and Randy are having so much fun, because they're two of the humans on Earth that have that huge amount of obscure knowledge. So they're a good pair.
Yeah. So that one, not a lot of people are going to know about, and you really have to know what you're looking for. But Randy will walk through that. Other attacks are tougher because they masquerade as genuine authentication events, genuine changes to the environment, and there's no way to tell that it's malicious or not. So those are kind of the two different situations we want to walk through. How can you tell that it's happening, and how can you tell that it's malicious? And sometimes there are traces that it is, and other times there's really no way to tell it apart.
Well, I mean, that's security all over, right? Because, I mean, half the time it's about the context of the information, not the information itself, right? Because it doesn't matter that this happened. It matters that this happened at this time from this place and this account. And, you have to have that whole picture to really have a true event, right?
Yep.
We'll get into the meaning of what SIM actually stands for, but yeah, we'll let that all go. So speaking of these attacks, right, and the ones you narrowed down, I know one of the ones that you're going to cover is Kerberoasting, which, by the way, if you've been listening to the podcast and following along on the blog series, you'll have a pretty good idea what Kerberoasting is, and maybe know a little too much about it to be comfortable, like me. But it's a scary one, Kerberoasting, right? Because it's got all the elements of an attack that's really hard to prevent. Just as a detail, right? So Kerberoasting, typically you go after an account like a service account or something. And I know the example you guys use all the time is go using just an SPN to pull out a database account, right?
Yep.
Just something that runs the database. Here's my question though, right? If I'm out of all the organizations that you speak to, and I can speak to the ones I speak to, how many do you think are prepared for this kind of attack? Right, because here's the thing. Ideally, administrative users, and maybe especially the account you run the database as, the one that would be exposed as an SPN, as a service account, typically they don't have a lot of rights to the actual information in the database. They shouldn't be able to select all the tables and such. As much as the platform lets you prevent that, you should. How many people are doing that? Like, how many people are actually going in and applying data security at the levels they ought to in the databases, even in the applications that run as these service accounts?
Yeah, I would say every customer that we've worked with is vulnerable to Kerberoasting for a couple of reasons. The first is password reset times. If you look at these are against service accounts. Right. And many customers who do password resets and enforce tight timelines around password resets, they don't do it on their service accounts and their applications, because that's the hardest place to implement it, because you have to potentially break something in order to set a password. You have to take something down temporarily in order to reset the password. So unless you've got a third-party solution doing that automatically for you, you're probably just leaving it alone. You set up the application, it's working, just don't touch it. Those accounts are extremely vulnerable to Kerberoasting. Then, as far as once you get the account and you can create silver tickets with it, being able to take advantage of the rights it has, most customers, again, they're not following that principle of least privilege there as well. And even what's more nefarious about the silver ticket part here within the Kerberoasting attack is, even if you are, attackers can add a forged privileged access certificate to the ticket and say that they're a member of groups that they're not a member of that maybe do have that access. So you have to be really, really good about least privilege to make sure that domain admins and other privileged groups that attackers are going to impersonate also don't have those rights. So very few, if any, customers are going to that level of detail to prevent this attack.
So two thoughts. First of all, on adding the extra privilege access certificates, in my mind, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but in my mind, the only people who are really going to go through that trouble is somebody who's targeting you really specifically, who essentially hits that first wall, i.e., I did do the Kerberoasting and I did get this silver ticket and I do have the privileges of the service account, but I can't get to the data I want. Most of them are probably going to stop there, right? Because all right, fine, because they've got 1,000 targets to worry about, right? There's some poor person actually just chugging through a list of stuff in some Eastern European or Chinese office someplace. They're not really an expert. But if there's an expert targeting you and they understand how to get past that boundary, and you're probably not stopping them at all, right? The other thought, and it's more of a question, I guess. Well, it's both. I can give you my answer, but it's all about me asking you questions. So you said that they're not, they need to have a third-party solution to help them with the password reset on the service accounts. I know a thing or two about that. That's certainly going to help you. But there's also, in the Microsoft platform, these capabilities around these newer types of service accounts, right? These group managed service accounts, and I forget the even newer one that they just came out with.
The group managed service accounts is the newer ones. The older one is the just managed service accounts.
Okay, I feel better about that. I remember the newer one. That's good. But are they just as vulnerable to Kerberoasting?
No,
because they don't have the same password management problems, right? But they're also protected against Kerberoasting for that reason, or for other reasons as well.
Yeah, so they can still be Kerberoasted, but the idea of Kerberoasting is it's a brute force attack against the ticket with no chance of lockout because you're doing it offline. So your vulnerability to that is basically how long an attacker has to crack away at that password with it still being valid.
Right.
So if you're changing it every day, the attacker would need to crack that successfully within a day, which is
Right.
pretty hard to do with the number of password combinations. So it's how often you reset it and how long and complex they are. Group managed service accounts take care of that by setting extremely long, complex passwords and doing it frequently. So those are going to be extremely difficult to successfully Kerberos.
I think the default Solaris root password for a long time was "let me in." I think that would probably be easy to crack,
Yeah.
right? But anyhow, definitely can't Kerberos that one though. Well, anyway. So last but not least, I got one last question for you here, and this one sort of departs from the attacks, kinda. I don't know that we've covered this in the past in the podcast, so this might be Google fodder for you folks out there. But Microsoft's been preaching this Red Forest design for a while. And let me see if I get this right: the Enhanced Security Administration Environment, what should be EASE but isn't, so because it would be really cool if it was EASE, but it's more like ESA. But Enhanced Security Administration Environment. They've been preaching this for a long while, right? Now, when you talk about what we've talked about with Randy and what we've talked about the attacks in general, how much of what goes on with the Red Forest could actually prevent a lot of what we've talked about?
Mm-hmm. A lot of the attacks that have to do with privilege escalation, especially when credential theft is involved, are protected from the Red Forest, because the principle of the Red Forest is don't let more privileged credentials wind up on less privileged machines.
Correct.
So
yeah.
That's great. And that would prevent an attacker who compromises a workstation from getting to servers, getting to domain controllers, getting to anything more privileged. But it's not going to solve all your problems. No. We just walked through Kerberosing. That one requires no privileges at all. And anybody can get to a workstation, grab the SPNs, create tickets, take them offline, and go to town trying to crack them and hope they get in. And if you can get your hands on a few dozen of those accounts and start cracking away at them, you're probably going to get into one of them eventually. And there's no tiered model that can really prevent that from being used. Now, if you have additional logon restrictions and network limitations wrapped around that model, then yeah, maybe you can. But in essence, it's not a solution to everything. It's mainly geared towards pass the hash and credential-based attacks.
I mean, it was an explicit response to pass the hash, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it actually was developed. There's a great, and maybe the doobly-doo will try to link to this. There's a great IO9 video about the enhanced security, the Red Forest enhanced security administration environment. And covers this in great detail. I'll find that and throw a link into the description. Yeah. I was gonna say I've said it twice now, and I really have to. Easy enough to find with Google, so I'm confident we can get that done. But what's interesting too is the promise of that tiered system was, as you say, don't let more privileged things end up on less privileged places. But it was also about network segmentation. It had all into it, which makes it a pretty good preventative environment. Some things in the design, if the directory is going to work, there's some things you just can't prevent. Although when you hook it up with managed service accounts, it also starts to look, like a really good solution there.
Yeah, you got to look at the attacks, and then you got to figure out the preventions in place. So. Preventions are meant for specific purposes. The managed service accounts helps you with Kerberosing. The Red Forest helps you with pass the hash and credential-based attacks. You start layering these things on top of each other, which is, what the intention is behind these recommendations.
Right.
You're getting pretty close to something.
Yep. And there we go. I think that's as good a place to end for this podcast as any. So thank you, Jeff.
My pleasure.
For joining us. Certainly, if you haven't gotten the hint, we're partnering up with Randy Franklin Smith from Ultimate Windows Security, and we're going to have a webinar soon. I probably should know the date of that. I'm actually now scrolling frantically from what's in front of me to see if
28th.
There we go. September 28th. Right. I was going to say, we're doing September 28th. I do have cheat notes, everybody. Wow, are we surprised? It's going to be called 3 Modern Active Directory Attack Scenarios and How to Detect Them. We also have, of course, our continuing blog series on all of these attacks. If you just go to stealthbits.com and look at the Active Directory attacks category, you'll find all of those, most of them written here by Jeff. But I'll be catching up soon. It's going to happen. And of course, if you want to try to take this advice and try to apply it, you can go to stealthbits.com and check out our security best practices assessment, basically a free trial that'll help you understand how well that you match up against these least privileged principles in protecting your platforms and your Active Directory. For today, that is all. Thanks for listening.